So what we're going to have a look at in this session is the question of evaluation and monitoring of the relationships. Now, there's a very, very important quote to keep in mind. Not everything that counts can be counted, and not everything that can be counted counts. Albert Einstein said that, the greatest counter of them all, probably. And it's important to keep that in mind when we're thinking particularly about evaluating, coaching and mentoring. So why do you evaluate? What's the point? Well, of course, you want to know what's going on with the scheme so that you can do something about it. There's no point in establishing a mentoring coaching program to find that a year later that things weren't working. So you do need ongoing evaluation and monitoring to kind of see how it's going in order to subject it to a kind of continuous improvement process. It also can be very motivating for people who are taking part, and it also can be used to encourage new people to join in. So the information that you get from the evaluation needs to be made public and put out there so that people can go, oh, this mentoring business, this coaching business seems to be quite a good idea. I'd like some of that. Mentoring and coaching develop well in an organisation if people think it's useful and want to participate. It also helps to identify problems in the relationship and may help to facilitate a resolution of those problems, a misunderstanding or something like that. And it can also be linked to whether or not the program has met its original objectives. But one of the things that's always endlessly fascinating about mentoring and coaching is quite often it doesn't meet the original objectives. And that may seem very strange. However, what it does tend to do is meet something which people hadn't thought about in the beginning, and the consequences of those things are beneficial anyway. So if you are evaluating mentoring and coaching, expect some surprises, some pleasant surprises, that things have worked in a way that you hadn't really expected. One organisation that I evaluated their coaching program actually found through the evaluation was that customer relationships improved and supplier relationships improved, which made the whole negotiation with suppliers, with customers, much more efficient, much more effective and much more pleasant. And that was a side benefit which was directly attributed to coaching, and it wasn't something that was thought about right at the beginning. And another reason to evaluate is to ensure that all the stakeholders that have been identified in the early stages, remember we looked about thinking it through in the early stage, can see that there's something in it, that there is justification for it to continue, for resources to be made available and to develop it. And there are three key questions which need to be asked. How will I know whether the scheme has been successful or not? What criteria will I use to make these judgments? And what measures will I use to assess the scheme against these criteria? So thinking about the focus of the evaluation, there are really three areas that could be looked at when evaluating coaching or mentoring. One is individual development. The second one is the relationships themselves. And the third one is the program overall. And there are some useful points at which you can do some review. There's at the planning stage, there's at the selection and training stage, there's after the first few meetings, as the relationship progresses, at the end of the relationship, and at the end of the scheme. These are useful points which have a natural feel to them, where you can monitor and where you can evaluate. You can gather information from people at these various stages. And it's also, when we're thinking about reviewing relationships, we can look at something like the number and frequency of meetings, the average length of relationships, the number of requests for new mentors or coaches gives you an idea as to how the scheme is developing, the number of relationships with agreed contracts, if that is a voluntary process, of course, and that it's important that there is confidentiality. You must keep that in mind, but looking for third-party feedback on the relationship. Has the line manager noticed that there's been a difference? That kind of thing is helpful.